Well, they're really out in force today. You got some evangelical street preachers. And these, I think, are the Derby Road people, because they shout from the top of the steps here between the church and the pub. Let's have a quick listen.
He will have mercy on him, and to our God he will freely pardon. There's a bleak message. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the evil man notice his thoughts.
Yeah, so one of them stands up there shouting at everyone, and he has various satellite cronies with leaflets. And there's one right here. I just might have to speak to him. In fact, I think I've spoken to him before. We'll see how it goes. Hiya. Are these coupons?
No, they're not. They're a Christian message about Easter, what Easter is about. Would you like to have a
Oh, are
look?
you with them?
Yes, I am.
Are they from
Derby Road.
Yes. Oh, okay, yeah.
I actually go to a church in King's Langley, but we're connected with it.
Well, I was brought up Christian, but I kind of fell away from it, you see.
Right.
So,
Well, you're not an atheist, probably, but have a little look at that. There's a tiny little, just a few fun examples, but it's just a little thought-provoking thing. Because today so many people have been convinced by, I think, by the media that has put doubt, well, it's partly Darwinism and partly the media has put doubt into the whole business of God. And my brother said to me, you just believe in fairy stories. Well, you know, there have been people who have questioned the whole thing.
yeah.
And have been clever people, and they've looked into it all, and the more they've looked into it, the more evidence they found. And
Evidence for God?
Yes, evidence for God and for Jesus being a real person who came 2,000 years ago, who died on the cross.
Can you tell me what some of the evidence is? Because that's what
You're looking
I'd looked for.
Yeah. Well, there was a man around the time of Jesus, or he was alive at the same time as Jesus. He never became a Christian, sadly, but he was sort of like a journalist at the time, a historian, journalist, but more like a journalist because it was his time.
Yeah.
He wrote about the facts happening, the evidence of his life, death, resurrection.
Yes.
The Bible's it's difficult if you're not convinced that the Bible is trustworthy and true. I would say that the more you read the Bible, the more you find that it is unlike any other book, and it speaks to you, and you're open. And therefore, surely it is inspired. It's not just written by men.
But isn't that what the Muslims say about their book?
Yeah, but if you read the Quran, I mean, honestly, it is a book of confusion. I mean, I was a nurse. I remember working in a psychiatric hospital for a while. It's almost like that. It's the sort of thing that people with mental illness would write. It sort of jumps around all the time, and it doesn't seem to, it doesn't hold together. Whereas the Bible, all real archaeology has proved the things that are in the Old Testament did actually happen.
Some of the temples are, definitely have been found, haven't they?
Oh, yes.
I don't think Noah's Ark has been found.
Well, there is some...
They say they find it.
Maybe. I'm not sure about that. But there was a man called Josh McDowell, who's American. I've
heard of him, yes.
You have. He wrote a book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. If you want to, that's a good book to read.
Okay.
Because he's one of those people who set out to disprove God. And he went to all these places, and the more he looked into it, he found the evidence was there.
Right.
So remember that. Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Right.
Two, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but that's enough to be going on with. When I was searching before I became a believer, and I was just a child, actually it's sort of like I almost went in two stages. I simply invited the Lord into my heart after repenting when I was 12.
Sure.
I Yeah, but when in a very childlike, simple way, I did. But not an audible voice or anything, but I knew God was saying to me, in order to go on with me, you need to pray every day, read your Bible, and meet with other Christians.
Okay.
And I ignored that.
How do you know that wasn't just you deciding yourself? If you say it wasn't an audible voice.
Okay, but I just ignored those feelings, thoughts, whatever you like to call it.
Yeah.
And then when I was 17, my last day of school, I felt rather sad because everybody seemed to have something that they knew they were doing immediately going on to, and it was a school which was partly boarding and partly day, and so all my best friends were boarders and they were going far away and I wasn't going to see them anymore, and I was lonely, I was quite lonely at the time. And a thought popped into my head, and I believe God does use thoughts sometimes.
Okay.
And this thought popped into my head, if only I had a holiday to look forward to.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I wish there was such a thing as a Christian youth holiday. I didn't know if there was such a thing. And there was this very, very quiet, shy girl in my class. Everybody else had gone. We were just clearing out our desks. And I still remember her coming towards me from the other side of the classroom and very shyly saying to me, Harriet, I don't know whether this would interest you, but I'm going on a Christian youth holiday this summer, and I wondered if you'd like to come.
Was that the same day?
That was the same hour that I was thinking that. And so I said, I'd love to. So I went with her, and it was up in Derbyshire.
Yeah.
And I had a marvellous time that week, wonderful time. And again, I felt very sad at the end because I thought I'm not going to see any of these people again. And it was a coach that took us home and dropped us off in various parts of the country on the way back. And I was sitting there thinking, this is lovely, but it's all ending now, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, some of the people I sort of got to know during that week, but not realise where they came from. One of the girls came over, were talking to me, and she said, where do you come from? And when I told her, she said, there's a big bunch of us here who go to a church at the end of your road. Would you like to come?
Yeah.
And from that time, at that time they had a youth group of about 30.
Yeah.
And week by week I learned, the Bible came to life, and I read more and more. Actually, I felt, although I had been to Christian schools and occasionally gone to church, I suddenly felt like I knew nothing.
Well, sure, I mean, these things might have happened, but see, I look at them and I think all we have to go on is stories written, maybe true stories, but stories written in a book. Okay? Anyone can write down anything they want. Clearly they did in the Quran, the Hindu holy book. There's been loads of holy books.
Like I say, it stands out a mile from those other so-called holy books. And it's interesting that you find out about the life of those particular, like Muhammad, what sort of life did he live? Did he actually do any miracles? Did he raise anybody from the dead? No. Actually he was a warmonger, very selfish. He married a 9-year-old girl.
I'm not approving of any of those holy books.
I know you're not. But actually, I read a very interesting book about Buddhism by a man who had one of his parents was a Buddhist and the other was Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
So he was sort of between the two, and but he became a true Christian, and he wrote this very interesting book about Buddha. And apparently, not many Buddhists know this, but towards the end of Buddha's life, he actually had a vision of a man with his arms outstretched, with holes in his hands and his feet.
I've never heard this story before.
No, not many people have. I'm just saying, that he found that amongst the many writings of Buddha.
Oh, right. Okay.
And, so I accept that must have happened. And of all the different religious leaders, I think, Buddha wasn't bad. He was actually a very humble man who was just trying.
Yeah, he wasn't claiming to be God or anything.
No, he wasn't. He was trying desperately to find a solution to his sin. He was ever so aware of his sinfulness and starved himself almost to death by.
I think he was trying to beat the local religion, which was Hinduism and reincarnation. He said you don't need to go through different lives. You can figure out yourself. In one sense, it's almost like humanism. He's saying rely on yourself and your own intellect, which is my belief. Really, I won't say belief. It's my reasoning.
Right.
You know, there may very well be a God, but I can't go by writings in a book. Especially when you look at the Old Testament, it just seems to be, like you're saying about the Quran, warmongering. Have you read the Old Testament?
Yeah, I know it's difficult, but I believe that they had to kill viciously and brutally the tribes around them. But if they hadn't, then I think that they would have been taken over much quicker by idolatry and all. That was always a temptation to the Israelites, wasn't it? Idolatry. If you knew about, the worst cases of the kind of things that these heathen nations did around them, like burning a child in a sort of cauldron, horrible things.
But you know the story about the Amalekites in 1 Samuel? I think it was Samuel himself. It was told by God to go into the Amalekite city and kill absolutely everything. Every man, woman, child, and animal.
I know.
And then he did all that, didn't like it, and he came out and he said, well, I've saved some of the animals. And God got very, very angry with them and said, go back and kill the animals.
Well, God...
That, if that was in the Quran, I'd be upset with that, and I think you probably would be too.
I had to think a lot about those things. God is good. I believe He is holy. A lot of the Old Testament is for them to deal with sin and to realise the seriousness of sin.
Yeah.
None of us today, myself included, really understand the seriousness of sin.
What is sin exactly? I mean, other than don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, that sort of thing, which we know that they're just not beneficial to us.
Yeah.
We know that. But what else does sin encompass?
Jesus took it a bit stage further, didn't he? He said in the Old Testament it says, "Do not murder." He says, "I tell you, do not even hate anyone in your heart. That is as bad as committing murder.
Yeah.
Do not lust after somebody. That is like committing adultery."
Yeah.
So it is your thoughts as well. And who can last for more than 5 minutes without having a thought that is not... I mean, even pride is considered a virtue today.
Yeah.
But it's not, no.
Yeah.
It's raising ourselves up above God, and it's not good.
But isn't that the way God made us?
No. God made Adam and Eve without sin, but because of the fall, sin entered in, and...
Yeah. But the fall came because they sinned, so they were capable of sinning.
Yeah, they were capable of sinning.
Yeah.
Otherwise we would be robots, wouldn't we? I don't believe, but I think God did the best possible way that a God could have made us. I think that there was that choice. But once that choice started, was overstepped,
right,
then that has affected the rest of mankind ever since. And the longer I believe that individually and nationally, the longer people have turned their backs on God, the worse things get. So this country, for instance, was once, I wouldn't say it was ever completely Christian, but it has had some good times in the past. And our laws were based around Christian things.
Sure.
Some people might put their head in the sand and say, oh, it's fine today, it's very nice and dandy, and crime's going down and blah, blah, blah. I don't believe so. I believe that things have changed a great deal in my lifetime.
A lot of things have changed for the better. I mean, I know when I was a kid, there was a lot more racism. You notice it in life, in school, on TV. and homophobia that was terrible. And now people are much more, I don't want to say tolerant, I don't like that word, much more understanding. You know, I've seen that happen, you know, and that's
There's
people
a
doing
tolerance
that.
that's right.
That's people doing that.
Yeah. There was a program, or I don't want to go into those subjects really too much, but I think there's a misunderstanding about tolerance and about equality.
Yeah.
Those are buzzwords, but actually there's some sinister things behind those buzzwords, because actually the talk about tolerance tends to lead to intolerance of Christians, because if a Christian dares to say the Bible says that homosexuality is wrong,
Yeah.
oof, you know, they're considered to be evil and wicked.
But that's because it's judging people who are not doing any harm to anyone else.
But they are, in Romans 1 it talks about sinning against well, I'll have to look it up, but you can look up Romans 1.
Is it the man shall not lie with another man because that is an abomination, they must be stoned?
No,
Oh, that's Leviticus, sorry.
Yeah. No, this is...
It's similar though, isn't it, in Romans?
It is
Yeah.
it's quite clearly implying that it is you're sinning against yourself when you abuse the body, and also you're hurting somebody else. So you are hurting somebody else. You're hurting the person you're doing it with, and you're both dragging each other down in the same direction.
Yeah. A gay couple are dragging each other down by being, in some cases, in love. You see, these are things I struggle with.
The statistics are that very few actually stay together. I
Straight couples as well.
I had friendships with
All my
girls.
friends have split apart, and they're straight couples.
Yeah.
You know.
I know. All I can say is that the Bible is clear about these things. It is unnatural. It's not the way we're made. We can't have children naturally that way. It is, you know,
It's only like 3% of
it's a
society.
sin. I believe it's a sin, but in the same way, I'm not saying I'm without sin. I'm full of other sins. All sin is sin. But there are certain sins that do affect other people.
Yeah. Well, some of it I agree with in the Bible, like, you know, don't kill, don't steal. We know that's bad. I know in my heart that's bad. But other things, they just look like the prejudices of the time. And people who take the Bible as their, you know, the gospel, are just latching on to those prejudices. You see what I mean?
It might surprise you that I believe in the submission of the wife to the husband, and I believe that men today are more commonly weaker because their women have risen up and become strong, and they are not the courageous men, strong men that they used to be. And I also don't agree with women preaching in churches.
Yeah.
I don't believe that women bishops and women pastors or ministers.
You don't
I believe
believe
that
in it for
preaching
why?
should be done by men, because Paul said that, and because it doesn't make a woman less important than a man. It just is a different role.
Do you think you would still believe that if it didn't say it in the Bible?
Well, I wouldn't know, would I? But I might
Would
not.
would you be happy with it?
I'm quite a strong woman. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't mean muscles. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I would have a tendency to dominate.
So you think it's better for the man to dominate?
Not to the point that Muslims do.
Yeah.
Not to the point of being, not like that. But ultimately, if my husband and I need to decide about something, we'll discuss it. But in the end, it's his decision.
So if your children, like there's two schools you want to send your children to, and you said, I really think this one is better for their education. And your husband said, I like this school because I went to it when I was younger. I prefer it.
We would discuss it, and we would...
But he would win out,
Might not. I might persuade him.
even if you know he's wrong.
Sometimes.
You see why I have trouble with these things.
I know. But I'm not always as submissive as I should be. I'm sinful in that area too. But,